But it also marks 50 years since Leeds United won the FA Cup for the one and only time in the club's history. The 1972 final saw them beat Arsenal by 1-0. The only goal was scored by Alan Clark 7 minutes into the second half. And two men who played in that game are with us. John Giles is still on the line, and his good friend Eddie Gray has been good enough to join us as well. Good evening, Eddie.
Good evening.
John's just been telling us you've had a good week of it.
We've had a good week, yeah. We had a few celebrations celebrating that cup win, which was a famous victory for the club. You know, the first time they'd ever won the FA Cup, and still the only time we've ever won the FA Cup.
When you go back, Eddie, and when you're at meetups like that with John and the players of that era, what are the games you end up talking about? Or maybe you don't end up talking about football at all, but are there games of your time together? And that group is so well known and you spend so much time. Are there certain games that really stand out more than any others?
Well, obviously, when you win the FA Cup, and it was the first time the club won the FA Cup, we don't really get into details, a lot of details about individual games, but just about the time we had together and, you know, the way the players could play, the number of big matches we played in. You know, it all adds up to, you know, like at the particular time, a great period for Leeds United Football Club. And obviously, Johnny was a big part of that, and I played in a lot of games as well. So it was a great time, and it's still great when you meet up and talk about these games. We don't get into details about the games. We just reminisce about certain things, you know, and it's nice to see the lads again.
John, the FA Cup, we talk about it now, has not been as big as it once was. It was absolutely massive in the 60s and 70s. And reading about the game, Billy Bremner was quoted in advance saying he'd won a league title, he had won cups in Europe, he'd won any amount of caps in Scotland. But the one thing he wanted more than anything else was an FA Cup. Can you put into context for people who don't remember that time, in compared to leagues, European Cups, just how big an occasion an FA Cup final was?
Well, yeah. Well, the FA Cup final was like Grand National Day in the racing. It was once a year. It was on the television from 11 o'clock in the morning, going through the games. It was just like a national day, and the history of it was fantastic. And I think most players, to be honest, would rather win the cup than the league, and certainly a lot of their own supporters would. Because the league could be won, had to be won over 42 matches, as we know. But Cup Final Day was Cup Final Day, and it was a glamour day. It was huge. They had 100,000 at Wembley, and there wasn't much football on television in the early days, Nathan. You know, so it was a big treat for people as well. But everything stopped. It was a national day, and at that time in 1972, when we played there, that's what it was, and that's why it was so big. You know, like if you talk to football people, well, Eddie's great on football and on the history of it. If you ask people who won the league in 1971 or 2 or before, most people wouldn't know. But most people who follow football would know who won the cup in 69, 70, 71, 72 and before. It was National Day, and it was a glamour day, Nathan.
That was a special FA Cup final as well, Eddie. It was the centenary FA Cup final. The Queen was in attendance. John talks there about the glamour. As a club and as a group, was it treated differently in terms of how you would prepare for the game? Would you get to stay in a better hotel the night before the match? Were the special cup suits? Were there more family members brought?
I mean, it's a one-off game then, the cup final. As John says, it was the most important single game in the whole calendar. And it was a game that everybody was looking forward to. You know, and I'll never forget, you know, like when you go to Wembley, I went to Wembley in those days, you're driving up Wembley Way and you see the Twin Towers. It was a great feeling of excitement. And you're looking forward to it so much. And thank goodness, you know, after disappointments we had in a few cup finals, the club, we eventually won it when we beat the Arsenal. And it was a great day for everybody connected with the football club.
Those couple of defeats, John, the defeat after extra time to Liverpool in 65 and then after a replay to Chelsea in those infamous games from 1970, how much pressure was that on your shoulders heading into this cup final, that having lost to this group of players and the questions about finishing as runner-up in leagues, even though you'd won one of them as well, how much pressure did you feel going into that game to finally win one?
Well, what happened, Nathan, we lost the cup final in 1965 to the great Liverpool team. And that was the first season we were promoted. You know, we finished up runners-up in the league and runners-up in the league, which was a fantastic effort to do that, right? So that was in 65. When we played Arsenal in the Cup, it was 1972. So all the players that played in the early Cup, Paul Reaney, Norman Hunter, these were all young fellas when we played against Liverpool in 65. You know, when we got to 72, all these lads were mature players at that stage. Eddie had come into the team, Peter Lorimer had come into the team, Alan Clark had come into the team, Mick Jones had come in. So it was a totally different team, Nathan, from the first one in 65. You know, there's a lot of new players, and the players who were in, whether it be Billy Bremner, Norman Hunter, Paul Reaney, these were all mature players at that particular stage. So there was no feeling in the team, we have to win this, because we lost it in 1965. Certainly from the Chelsea match, that went extra time, as you know, and a replay. And that was just a huge, huge match. And Chelsea pipped us. But we were ready for the match in 1972 in a big way. And we were playing a national team that most people forget had won the double the previous year, Nathan. So they were a very, very, very good team. And we were, I think, 71, 72, I think we were at our peak at that particular stage. Eddie, as you know, is a good pal of mine, was fantastic. Was a fantastic player. Peter Lorimer coming into the team. Alan Clark had been bought, Mick Jones. So we were a totally different team from the early stages.
The Leeds team then, John during COVID picked his all-time Leeds 11. You were in it, don't worry about that. But 10 of them started that game. I'm fairly sure, John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Reaney, Madley, Charlton, Hunter, Bremner, Lorimer, Clark, Jones and Gray, and of course you didn't pick yourself, John, of the team. But in goals, Dave Harvey started in goals in that cup final. And watching back the match last night, they mentioned there was only half an hour beforehand that it was confirmed that Dave Harvey would start in goals, that Gary Sprake wasn't going to play, and Harvey hadn't played a huge amount that season. Eddie, was it a surprise to the players, or had you prepared in advance that Harvey would be the keeper?
No, I don't think it was a surprise, actually. I mean, I think Don had made his mind up he was going to play Dave. I mean, Dave was a very reliable goalkeeper, different type of goalkeeper to Gary. Dave was very steady, didn't make many errors, very confident in his own ability. And it was proved that Don made the right decision. I mean, playing Dave, and we felt comfortable with Dave playing behind us, because you knew he was that reliable, solid goalkeeper. And I think John would agree with that. You know, you look, and he's a very important player, the goalkeeper, you know. And, you know, if you're playing in the cup final, you know, you get a few nerves, but Dave coped with it very well that day.
I think what happened as well, Eddie, at that particular time, like, to be fair, Gary had a lot of chances, he made a lot of mistakes. But Dave actually played in the semi-final, Nathan.
Yes.
Right.
He played in the semi-final.
So he beat Birmingham in the semi-final. Okay.
Yeah, we didn't know, and Dave himself didn't know until we had a team talk that Gary was left out. But he played in the semi and played a few matches leading up to the final to play in the final. But Dave was a very, very competent goalkeeper. Gary, at that stage, I think his nerves had gone. He was making quite a few mistakes around that time, Nathan. So Dave was solid and did his job.
Was that a talking point around the dressing room, Eddie, about Gary Sprake? Because I know it's come up many times, John, we talk about it, about the mistakes he was starting to make, and Don Revie keeping faith with him maybe a little bit longer than he needed to.
I mean, my opinion on Gary, I must be honest and say I think Gary was one of the best natural goalkeepers ever seen. But once the media get heavily involved in games that were on the television a little bit more, Gary got a little bit nervous and he made a few errors. You know, I think Don made the right decision, you know, when we played in that cup final. I mean, we had the cup final before, you know, when Chelsea in the replay, it was a game we should have won. So I think, you know, it was always in Don's mind to bring Dave into the side at some stage, and he did it at the right time, I think. You know, looking back in the history of the two goalkeepers, and as John says, Dave was a very able goalkeeper, and as I mentioned earlier, not flash, just did his job, and he did the job very, very well.
John, I thought from talking to you through the years that the centre backs at Leeds were meant to leave the pretty stuff to yourself and Billy Bremner. Let you do the passing. I was watching Norman Hunter and, geez, he constantly got in the ball and constantly looking to get on it, and his ability to just shimmy past it a striker if he needed to, and pick out a pass to yourself or Bremner or spray it out to the wings. Like, I know you've never been one for would players of the past make it in the modern era, because they would adapt in whatever way they had to. Like, he played like a thoroughly modern centre half in that match.
Yeah, well, Norman Hunter was a great player. And he had this reputation of Norman bite your legs. He could get stuck in, of course he could. But Norman, in my opinion, I think Norman was a great player. And when he had to do things like that, he never would do them if Eddie was there or I was there or Billy was there. Actually, he used to give out all the time, Norman, between Billy and myself, because he used to say, when he got the ball, if he gave it to me, Billy would be on to him. And if he gave it to Billy, I'd be on to him. But I used to say to Norman, you're very lucky. There's a lot of players play. When they get the ball in that position, they've nobody to give it to. But Norman could do whatever. Eddie will tell you. Eddie will tell you about Norman.
Yeah, Norman Hunter was a great footballer. Brilliant. I mean, as John says, Norman had this reputation, bite your legs. But Norman was a terrific footballer, great passer of the ball, confident on the ball. But he knew he had players in front of him, though, like Johnny and Billy, that could create a lot better than he could. So as soon as he got the ball, that was the first thing Norman thought about. And that was one of his great strengths, I think. If he thought Johnny and Billy were on, he would knock it to them quickly. If he thought I was on, or Peter Lorimer, he would hit that cross-field ball to Peter. That was how he was such a great player. He did the right things at the right time, Norman.
He loved playing as well, Nathan. He loved football.
Right.
You know what I mean? And he used to say that, when I get the ball, he very seldom had a chance to use his ability because Billy or I were there or Eddie was there. But when he had to do it, he could do it.
Oh, I could.
You two little so-and-sos are coming back all the time. And I remember Don, I don't know if you remember Eddie, I think it was after one match, he might have given the ball away,
Yeah.
Which was very unlike him. And after the match, Don was on to give him a right telling off. And he says, Norman, you give the ball to the players that can play. And Norman didn't like that because Norman couldn't play.
No, he wouldn't like that. I'm surprised he never got me kicked on that day.
Eddie, when we talk about English centre halves of that era, so often it's focused on Bobby Moore for what he did with England and at the World Cup. And I think John's often said that Bobby Moore was maybe the ultimate big game player, that when it came to a World Cup final, but that actually week in, week out in English football for that era, Norman Hunter was the best centre half.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, as a club player, Norman Hunter, I think, was the best club player, a better club player than Bobby Moore. But Bobby Moore was an outstanding international player. But we're forgetting about Big Jack. I mean, there was a period of time I think that Big Jack was the best centre-half in the world.
Right.
For about 4 seasons, Big Jack was some centre-half. I just thought it was terrific. And the two of them together, formidable partnership, Charlton and Hunter.
And what was it, Eddie, that made Big Jack the best centre-half in the world for 4 years?
I just think Jack was quick. He was great in the air. And it was deceptively quick, Jack, He had this big long stride and people wouldn't get away from him. When Jack was on song, he was formidable. I think John would agree with that.
Yeah, I thought he was the best centre-half about 4 or 5 years. I agree with Eddie there. And the Norman Hunter situation with Bobby Moore, I always said, week in and week out, I take Norman.
Yes.
For the big matches, I'd go for Bobby Moore.
Yeah.
But then again, you see, Bobby Moore played for West Ham. And Bobby Moore, they were never going to win anything, but they won the Cup 1 year. So Bobby was very, very, in my opinion, in many ways, lackadaisical towards it. Whereas Norman was wholehearted for every match, every training session. Norman was in, doing it. So week in and week out, I take Norman. It was the big match at Wembley, I'd go for Bobby Moore.
John, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, I think Norman Hunter's probably one of the best club defenders I've ever seen at club level, week in, week out. But when Bobby Moore walked out with that ball in his hand for England, he was outstanding, John.
Yeah.
That Arsenal team that you beat in the 1972 Cup final had just won the double. It had Frank McClintock captaining the side at centre back. Peter Storey was in midfield. They'd signed Alan Ball. Charlie George was there. John Radford. George Graham was a part of that Leeds team. Charlie George is obviously someone that grabs the attention when you watch that sort of game back. John, he hit the crossbar at one stage with a brilliant volley. He's a player who, when you think of that era, is seen as one of the real flair players. When you talk about that week in, week out, what was Charlie George like as a footballer?
I wasn't a big fan, Nathan. He'd a lot of ability, but you couldn't depend on him week in and week out. He could do a lot of good things. But let's put it this way, he wouldn't have got anywhere near our team.
Right. Didn't have the consistency.
No.
No, it's funny you talk about the Arsenal and the very top side. But for about 1965 to 1975, I was telling John this, don't know if he remembers, we played Arsenal about 23 times and they only beat us twice, I think.
Right.
And they were a great team. I mean, if you look through the records, us playing against the Arsenal, we usually came out on top. We did it in the League Cup final, we did it in the FA Cup final, and normally we did it in league games as well. I think John would agree with that.
Yeah, I think we beat them 10 times on the bounce, Eddie. Well, it was one of those
series,
teams.
Yeah.
The celebrations then, and the final whistle going, and that historic moment where Leeds finally win that FA Cup. Are there standout memories, Eddie, of being on the pitch or walking up the steps or in the dressing room afterwards? What do you remember of the aftermath?
Well, we didn't get much time to celebrate in the dressing room because we were straight up to Wolverhampton to play them on a Monday night, which was a bit off, But what I remember is actually walking up the steps and thinking, you're going to get an FA Cup winners' medal. And for, growing up in Glasgow, when I grew up in Glasgow, a bit John growing up in Ireland, I mean, the big game you watched every year was the FA Cup final. I mean, I used to love watching the FA Cup final, and it was always on the box. So to finally realise an ambition to play, and win an FA Cup, it felt terrific. And I'm sure all my teammates felt exactly the same. And Johnny had already won it, though, That's the difference. John had done it with Manchester United in 1963, when Manchester United won it. But, for me, it was just a great occasion, especially after, losing the Chelsea Cup final. And I know the club lost to 65 to Liverpool. So it was a great feeling.
And you touch on the trip to Wolverhampton. That was the madness. That must even 50 years on be a frustration that, we talk about Arsenal winning the double in 71, Spurs winning it in 61. That probably should have been a Leeds side that also won a double, only for the way the fixture list ended up.
Well, if we had played the game on the Wednesday night instead of the Monday night, I'm sure we would have won the game. We just never had a lot of time to recover, and a few players had knocks, but you're still getting into the game. Thinking you can win the game, but it wasn't to be. But I think fatigue played a big part in that game on the Monday night.
It was outrageous, really.
It was, John.
Nathan, because we were going for the league and the cup, as you know.
Yeah.
But the previous week to the cup, when we played Wolverhampton, that was our fourth match in 8 days.
Right.
Before the cup final, we played on the Saturday, on the Monday. Then with the cup final on Saturday, and then Wolverhampton on the Monday.
And why didn't they just play the game against Wolves on the following Wednesday or Thursday?
Well, Alf Ramsey, there was an England international match coming up, Nathan, and I think him and Don didn't get on. And it was actually the FA and Alf Ramsey who said, if you want to play on the Wednesday, you'll play without the England players. So there's about 4 or 5 England players in the squad. So there was no let off. We had to play with those players on the Monday because he said, I want the English players in the hotel, I don't know where they were, by 12 o'clock on the Monday.
Wow. And that ends up costing a double.
John's right. We actually played. We played in May the 1st, May the 6th and May the 8th, and all big games, know. And that ended up with the Wolverhampton game, the last game in that series. But the teams wouldn't be asked to do that now,
So
It was just too many games for us at the end of the season.
Did you get the open top bus parade through Leeds ever?
Yeah, we had the bus talk through Leeds. You know, I can't even remember much about it, but it was we done it. Yeah.
Yeah, it happened.
We got a big crowd out for that. I think it was.
We did, John. John, we did. I mean, in fact, we were looking at a photograph of it the other day, and trying to pick the players out who were on the bus top and looking for certain players. It was, it was a great occasion. That.
Yeah.
I mean, the Leeds crowd came out, Nathan. You know.
I'm sure they did.
You know, because it was they realised how difficult it was to do what we were trying to do on the double at that particular time. But they still remembered. I mean, they still had the memory of winning the FA Cup as well, you know.
Yeah. Lads, it's been brilliant to talk to you. Eddie, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you very much.
John, as always. I don't know if we'll give you the call next year, John, for the Sunderland 50th anniversary.
Oh, don't talk about that.
He won't be answering the phone that day, I suspect.
I didn't hear that, Nathan.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nathan.
Thanks a million, lads. Hopefully plenty more reunions coming up. We'll talk to you soon. John Giles and Eddie Gray there. 50 years since Leeds United won the FA Cup.